Thanks for tuning in to the HRchat podcast. Hey, this is Bill Banham, one of the hosts of the show. Just before we get into today's episode, here's a quick message from one of our supporting partners.
We get people. We know what they want from work, why they join, why they leave, why they stay. We get tech, and we understand that it's never the whole solution. At Talent Solutions RPO, we work across every industry and talent market in the world. In the end, it's people who make the difference. Let Talent Solutions RPO help you get the people your organization needs. Visit mpgtalentsolutions.com/HRchat to learn more.
Welcome to the HRchat podcast, bringing the best of the HR and talent communities to you.
In healthy ecosystems, old systems fail and better ones replace them with a continual process of evolution. In the world of work, old centralized command and control modes and broken business models will fall apart as better structures take their place. Work is not dead, just the way we have thought about it. We are seeing this happen at an accelerated rate as a result of the coronavirus, of course. In this HRchat episode, I'm joined by Andrew Spence, who will share his thoughts on an increasingly decentralized workforce and how it will impact organizations and HR departments. As work unbundled, explains Andy, it will be reconstituted into new forms and also refresh some older ones that we are more familiar with. Andy is an experienced management consultant specializing in the design and implementation of new HR operating models to deliver business goals. He has worked on over 25 complex transformation programs with organizations including BP, John Lewis Partnership, United Health Group, and the UK public sector. Andy has an MSc in cognitive science and artificial intelligence. That's pretty niche. And his recent research has included publishing a paper with the Tapscotts Blockchain Research Institute on blockchain and the CHRO, which I'm definitely going to ask him about today, in addition to developing an e-learning course on blockchain and HR. Andy, it's my absolute pleasure, sir, to welcome you to the show today.
It's a pleasure to be here, Bill, to speak to you this evening.
I'm a little bit daunted because you're a very, very clever chap and you know a lot of stuff that I have no idea about. Usually I have a fairly good idea when I interview my guests, but this is delving very deep tonight, but it's going to be a juicy, meaty conversation nonetheless. But just go a little bit easy on me, Andy, you brainiac, if you don't mind.
Likewise, Bill. Really looking forward to chatting with you.
Okay, so beyond my wee introduction, please tell our listeners a bit more about yourself and what you get up to.
So I work on transformation programs for different organizations, all around, HR, people management. How do we best deliver our organization strategy, whether that's keeping prisoners safe or whether that's in the retail environment or the health environment. So that keeps me busy. And I've worked on a number of those programs over the years. More recently, I'm working more closely with what I would call HR technology providers who are providing some of the infrastructure that we use in our organizations and doing some thinking about what the future might look like in work, given the new infrastructure that is being built.
Let's start with a bit of a high level question, if you don't mind, just to sort of ease me in, Andy. Can you paint a bit of a picture of the ways that we used to work, what organizations used to look like, and the shift in the way that we work now as a result of the gig economy, and of course, more recently, the effects of the virus?
Yeah, things have certainly changed, haven't they? And there's some really obvious ways. If you look at social media, you'll hear lots of people moaning about Zoom calls and meetings. And really, they don't seem to be the problem. We've always had meetings. I think part of the issue is how we actually organize our work. So I think that's that needs to change. And then if we look at the infrastructure of work, it seems in this digital age, we're still using resumes and CVs. Half of them have little white lies on. I'm sure yours doesn't, Bill, or mine, but a lot of them have little facts that aren't quite true. They're not verified. And it seems that in this age of Google, where we've actually managed to be able to search our knowledge base, the world of work hasn't quite caught up with it. So I think that's part of the infrastructure. Seems very old-fashioned these days. And I think that over the next decade, we're going to see that being brought probably into the post-internet age, where actually we're going to have more of a decentralized type of arrangement, where we hold and own our resumes, CVs. We collect credentials from all the gigs and the work we're doing, the learning we're doing, all this kind of stuff, and we bring it round with us to share with who we choose to share it with. So I think that's going to change in our rather long careers over the next few years.
So for any organizations out there who are looking to overpay their next hire, who have specialities in, for example, HR podcasts, I assure you that my CV has not many white lies in it at all, I hope. But
it's all verifiable, Bill. It's all out there.
It's all verifiable, exactly. Now then, you've published a paper with Tapscotts Blockchain Research Institute, as I mentioned in the intro, on blockchain and the CHRO. And in addition to that, you developed an e-learning course on blockchain and HR. We've never really spoken about blockchain and HR on this show before, Andy. This is new territory for us. Tell us a bit about the connection.
Well, a few years ago, I was intrigued by what I was hearing about Bitcoin, and blockchain. And blockchain's the underlying technology behind Bitcoin. So I remember one weekend a few years ago really reading up on this. And the thought occurred to me, hey, could this be useful in HR? And so I publicly blog and write and speak about some of the ideas that occurred to me. And I wrote an article about this, and it got quite a lot of interest from technologists, futurists, entrepreneurs saying, do you know what? This could help us with the infrastructure of work, the plumbing of our work. And really, of all the emerging technologies, on the face of it, blockchain is the least exciting. It doesn't talk to you like AI. It's not a cute robot. It won't take out your kidney stones while the surgeon has a cup of tea. It's basically a distributed, decentralized, slow database. But I actually think it could have a bigger impact on the world of work than some of the other technologies like AI. And I think where we're seeing blockchain being used, when I first wrote about it, there was about 50 different startups around the world working on little projects. But now what we're seeing is large organizations starting to get together to collaborate, to create not-for-profit foundations, to create standards that we can use to manage our data going forward. So it's quite exciting how it's developed over those 2 or 3 years. Nothing to do with Bitcoin or the speculation around the crypto at all. It's more around the looking after our data, verifying information, and enabling. I think the real enabler for me is enabling better work platforms. Now, we all know of all the different platforms that are used in the gig economy, from Upwork to Fiverr and platforms like that. Well, increasingly, they're being used to exchange work. So I think blockchain can enable people to first of all be able to verify their own identity, to be able to verify our work credentials, and then to actually use that data to exchange information on platforms in a more effective and efficient way. So I think it could have a major impact on the way we source work in the future. And that answer didn't involve any explanation of cryptography, thankfully, for both of us.
I'm still awake at this end. That's the main thing, right? So let's talk a bit more about what this new Some people would say scary. Some people would say exciting world of work looks like. What types of new organizations will emerge, Andy? And what does the new social contract between companies and workers look like?
I think that the traditional forms of employment are breaking down a little. You know, there's a lot of people now who can earn in many different ways, from people providing content, from newsletter writers, podcasters, TikTokers, vloggers. People are creating content and getting remunerated and paid for this content, which is really interesting. Take an example. If a service is free, then you are the product. You've heard of that phrase before. And it applies also for things like Google search and maps. It's a free service. It's darn useful. But of course, our data is then used and sold to advertisers. Now, I think this model is changing around a little bit. For example, the Brave internet browser will allow you to choose which adverts you click on, and you get rewarded in tokens for that. So it puts you back in control of your own personal data, and it turns the business models on their head a little bit. And I think we'll see that in the world of work too, where we're able to monetize our skills, our time more effectively. So I think the upshot for that is that there may well be more of a liquid workforce to pull on for organizations around projects when they're needed, to source teams as and when they're needed, and probably a smaller cadre of full-time contracted employees. I suspect that's the way we're going in certain industries.
What kind of percentage retention of traditional roles then do you think we'll see, say, by 2030? Are we saying that because of the gig economy, because of AI and machine learning, 80% of traditional roles won't be there anymore? Company held roles, and it'll just be a core of people who pull the strings, do functions that connect people, that assess certain job requirements will still be in place.
I think that's a great question, and it's one I can't really answer. I mean, I think if we rewound 10 years or even 20 years from today, we'd have never have guessed, for example, the iPhone, the smartphone, and the impact that would have had on society and business. It's going to be very hard to predict the actual work that is going to be needed in 10 years' time. What I do think, though, is that the mechanisms for finding work and workers will be different, will be more effective and smoother. And I think there's still going to be a need for the human characteristics that we have around empathy and dexterity, communication skills, for example, and compassion, this kind of thing. So I think it will change, but it's going to be very hard to predict, what the kind of ratios are going to be for a particular industry going forward.
Okay, well, let me try and rephrase that a little bit with a couple of supplementary questions then. And you've touched upon this a little bit. What's left of the traditional organization there? What will be the core of the company that we can relate to, that has existed up to this point?
Well, I think we could apply that to human resources. So what we've seen over the last 10 years or so, the systems have moved to the cloud. It's enabled certain efficiencies. I might guess at, say, 20% reduction in some of the admin we've done. But HR becomes even more important for organizations because, the core skills needed are all around people and change and organizations. So they're strategic, they're around compliance, around workforce technology, making sure that teams are self-sufficient and are achieving organizational goals. So I think there's a whole load of specialists that are going to be required in HR, but probably not as many people who are doing more process-orientated work. I think that will be melted away somewhat because of the technology. And then another role for for HR going forward will be if we imagine that we've got different talent pools, not just the permanent hires, but the contractors, the suppliers, all the different types of freelancers that we could use to source work. Part of the role in an organization will be nurturing these pipelines, getting them to work effectively together, using people analytics to try and work out how to get a good team from this disparate group of people. So that's going to be key. And of course, employer brand is still going to be important. These groups of independent freelancers, workers are still going to want to work for your organization. Employer brand becomes even more important in the kind of scenario I describe.
So employer brand, sure, I get that. And if freelancers have got certain contracts where they're essentially an employee, then they'll want to work for a company that they can relate to. But company culture is a completely different thing, isn't it, Andy? How can you really connect with colleagues if you're disparate? One person is earning 3 times as much as what they would have done if they were a traditional employee, and the resentment that might cause. And lots of the employees are perhaps only there for a shorter period of time. How can an HR department truly hope to develop a sense of purpose, a sense of company culture in that kind of environment?
It's a great point. And I think one of the roles for HR is almost like the organizational people scientists having to answer that question. I mean, I guess the answer is going to vary in utilities, manufacturing, financial services, in different regions. So they're going to have to, through trial and error and looking at the data and a bit of experimentation, work out the right mix for their organization. So I think there's not going to be an easy answer to maintaining a consistent company culture. But I do think it's one of the areas where HR in the future will add real value if it adapts a little bit from where it is now.
And what about benefits? What about total rewards? I've been interviewing a few people recently on related topics, and they're of the opinion that you don't have to be an employee of a company to be able to benefit from traditional and non-traditional rewards to attract and be retained by a company. Do you see that as a case? Imagine you contact me, you're like, Bill, I love your podcast. It's one of the best HR podcasts I've ever heard, and I totally need you to do this contract with me. You are a contractor, but however, I'm willing to throw in yoga sessions and childcare as well as all the usual rewards and benefits that one would get. Is that a scenario which is more likely as we enter the 2020s to differentiate an employer when they're looking for the best freelancers? Or on the flip side of this, because of the way the economy is right now, do employees not need to worry about that? Because frankly, there are so many people who need work.
Great question. I think the supply and demand dynamic will play out. We're only going to see where we are with COVID and the pandemic in the next few months and the next few quarters and years, probably, in terms of that. But I think we need to be creative. So, some of the organization shapes are changing from these 20th century command and control organizations and long lock-ins to keep people. If we might get more attrition, we might get people moving around more because it would be easier. It does depend on the economy, though, as you mentioned. And I think if it comes to people working as a freelancer or a permanent, then I think we're going to start to see changes. So, if you've worked as a freelancer, we know how difficult it can be to get access to financial services, to loans, mortgages, that kind of thing. So there needs to be an associated market that is developed for insurance, all these different things. So I think that will change, and I think that will make it more beneficial. And I think, for those people scientists in the HR department, it's working out actually what will attract that superstar freelancer podcaster into my organization for a year, for 18 months. And the usual rules will apply. It'll be cash money, employer brand, and culture. So yeah, I mean, they need to be measured alongside the equivalent for permanent employees, don't they?
For this particular podcast, I'd throw in flexible hours, and any help that you can give me with childcare would be greatly appreciated.
I thought you were going to give me a Bitcoin rate, Bill.
We can talk about this. We're already coming towards the end of this interview, Andy. Before we wrap things up, I'll ask a couple of questions for you. Big one for you again. I feel like we started with a big one, so let's as we come to the end here, let's conclude with one of the big ones. What does all of this mean for careers then? So we've got these young people, the Generation Z, who are in their early 20s or just maybe finishing college or university right now. What can they aspire to be? Is it the leader of their own agency? Is it to be the best independent they can be, or should most of these young people still hope and want to have a career? Now, again, I'm just going to anticipate part of your answer here is you're going to say, Bill, it depends on the industry. Of course, absolutely. But in terms of a general mindset for that generation coming through now,
well,
what does the world of work look like for them?
I think it's going to look completely different for young people like you and me, Bill, to the careers of the last century. It's all going to change. So, it's expected that babies born in richer countries today are expected to live past 100 years old, which is amazing, isn't it? And so if we think of our current education system, where we might go to university for 3 or 4 years when we're sort of 19, 20, and then work for, 40 years, that's all going to change. I mean, my view is that education is also going to be massively disrupted. And we're seeing that with the pandemic, aren't we, for all sorts of funding and health reasons. So I think education is going to be massively disrupted. And what individuals are going to do is pick up a whole series of useful work credentials. It could be courses, skills, experiences that they're going to carry through them for their long career. I think they're going to do that having almost like a digital resume that they can show people and use the data on. So I think that's going to be something that they can just accrue these skills to demonstrate that you are who you are and you can do what you do going forward. And I think, society is going to have to work that through around retirement and around welfare and learning. I think what we're talking about sounds like the future of work, but really it's the future of society. And I think we've got some really important questions, funding questions around careers going forward. But I think to answer your initial question, I do think it's shorter term projects are going to be more common. People will be moving around, developing. And I actually think that is a really positive thing. I actually think people are more likely to reach their potential in work on that basis, rather than being stuck in a job they don't particularly like, commuting for a couple of hours a day for a boss they don't like in a hierarchical organization. I actually think it's gonna be more positive. People are gonna flourish in this case. But back to your key point, it does depend on the supply and demand economics in work. There needs to be enough work to go around in this respect.
So all that stuff I was taught in my politics degree in regards to Gramsci, and when he said everything will get increasingly worse, he was wrong. Actually, there's a good opportunity out there for you young folk as you enter a new epoch, and you just got to seize it. Andy, before we wrap things up, how can our listeners learn more about you? And I understand that you've also just launched a new newsletter, the Workforce Futurist newsletter, which frankly, a bunch of these questions they were based on topics that you're going to be talking about in that. So how can people subscribe to the newsletter as well?
On social media, I guess my preferred platform is Twitter. I'm at Andy Spence, and you could probably find the Workforce Futurist on Substack from my Twitter profile. I've written one post so far about unleashing the decentralized workforce. And the reason I set it up was really to get some kind of community around this. I'll ask some tricky questions, but I want the community to contribute some of the answers, some of the stories, some of the points of view. So please find me there, subscribe, and comment and get involved that way. Thank you.
Excellent. So at this point, I usually just thank my guests for joining me. But in your case, Andy, I could sit here and learn a lot from you for hours. So I'd just like to take this opportunity before I do say thank you to definitely invite you on again to be a guest on this show. And as it's being recorded, you probably do have to say yes.
Absolutely. It'd be my great honor to speak to you as it was today. And in the future, it'd be great to continue our conversation. Thanks, Bill.
Awesome. Thank you. So, Andy, thanks so much for being a guest today. This was great. Listeners, I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did. A similar interview that you might want to check out as well from back in June 2020 was with a chap called Jeff Wold, who's the co-founder of a company called Work Market. He talks about some similar issues as this, but it doesn't touch upon the blockchain or any of that side of things. So do check that one out as well. But just for today, that leaves me to say to you, the audience, thank you very much for listening. Stay safe and happy working.
Thank you for listening to the HRchat podcast, brought to you by the HR Gazette.